Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time to register and join us today. A special thanks to our speakers who have so generously volunteered their time today to share their knowledge and their thoughts with the community. We welcome Adrian Carmody, Managing Director of Optima Training and Consulting, Rory Ryan, Operations Director of Kirby Group Engineering, and Fergus Barry, HR Director, Kirby Group Engineering. So just to kick off with some housekeeping, in order to have a very friendly session today, could I ask that everyone pop in a little hello and into the chat feature, and please feel free to add your name and your company name if you wish. This chat feature can be used for any questions you have throughout the session or the Q&A feature that's located at the bottom of your screens. Just a reminder that all questions will be addressed at the end of today's session. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded and will hopefully be shared with you across the coming days. The first speaker I'm delighted to welcome is Adrian Carmody, Managing Director of Optima Training and Consulting. They offer a range of courses across a number of areas such as L&D, HR and recruitment, working with a wide variety of sectors from manufacturing, pharma, medical device, healthcare, semi-state and many more. Adrian has very kindly worked with us before, delivering successful webinars throughout the pandemic, especially our knowledge sharing and return to work protocols. So I can assure you we're in very safe hands. Adrian, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Caoimhe, and thanks to yourself and all at Limerick Chamber for having us assist on this today. So hopefully we'll be able to share a little bit of our tips. There's one thing I'll say in advance, there's quite a lot of content going to be shared in this presentation. We won't obviously have time to go through it all in such a short window, but I will make the presentation available so it can be distributed afterwards. So don't worry if we're kind of only touching the surfaces of some of the topics that we cover. So on my session, we're going to focus on leadership and best practice for employee retention, basically how we can attract staff, how we can keep staff, and best practice. Share some of the things that we would have come across and maybe what we try to do ourselves. I don't think any of us are a finished product in terms of how well we can look after staff. And at times, I suppose we get caught up in running of our businesses itself, the priority, but obviously our employees are very important to us. And especially now at this point in time when it can be very, very difficult to get staff, to attract staff, to retain staff. So a couple of quotes for you. First of all, I'm sure you've seen them before, but again, it's all around development of staff. If we do develop our staff, we want to make sure that they continue to stay with us, but we want to develop them and then not worry about the other part. So if we keep them well enough after developing them, they will stay with us. So some of the issues that I see myself, at the moment is a challenging environment for all organizations. We're coming out of a period of COVID, a couple of years where, businesses were under a lot of pressure. But also employees were under a lot of pressure as well, and management. So it's all, in terms of human beings under pressure, from both sides in relation to that. So difficult past few years, challenging environment in terms of costs, in terms of COVID, lots of different things. So an employees market at the moment, for anyone involved in recruitment, and we have our own area on that, Optima Recruitment, we're seeing very much that. So it is a race to the top in terms of payments that are being made out. It's very, very difficult to attract the right talent. So it is really a fight for talent at the moment. So we have to try and make sure that we're doing everything we can in terms of our culture, in terms of our brand, in terms of how we look after our current staff. It's much more cost effective to retain the staff we have than it is to recruit new staff, that's for sure. So it's difficult and costly to find those new resources. So the competition has changed. Obviously, before we might have been worried about people in Limerick or the Midwest. Now, obviously, if we're talking about our staff or who's looking for our staff, it's nationally, it's internationally as well. Okay, so it's not just regionally around here, but because of remote working, because of the change to hybrid working, where people work has become, given a lot more options to people. So therefore, the people that are looking for our staff and the people that are looking for the same staff as us, that pool has really expanded, and that geographic location isn't as narrow as it once was. So right now, studies are showing we're in a kind of a transitional period where about 40% on average, 1/3 to about 40% of people are evaluating their roles currently, evaluating their careers currently. So there's a huge focus now in terms of leadership and in terms of what we can do for our staff, what we can do to attract and how we can retain staff, and kind of leadership and development opportunities that are there on that. A couple of things we see, first of all, in our own business. So we'd be a small business relative to Kirby, obviously, but we've done very well, I think, in terms of holding on to the staff we have. We have staff with us for a number of years. Obviously, you're going to have staff. There's going to be attrition. There's no such thing, I don't think, is no transition, and it wouldn't be a good thing either. I think viable businesses need transition. You need turnover of staff to some degree, but certainly we're trying to make sure that we keep the people who are important to us, and that if people are going, they're going for a better opportunity. And I suppose when that happens, we have to be mindful of that as well, that people have to do the best for themselves. In terms of gaps, obviously we don't do everything the way we should, and certainly if my own staff were listening to this, I'm sure they'd be first to testify that we could all do a little bit better in terms of, you know, acknowledgement, in terms of reward, in terms of all the different things we're going to talk about over the next few minutes. What I've seen also in terms of, it's interesting that the courses that are being requested of us at the moment, a huge upturn in terms of inquiries in relation to retention. Retention has been a big issue for companies, obviously, and they're looking at that. How do we retain our staff? So we have programs on that. Leadership and development, again, huge amount of inquiries in relation to leadership development, communication skills, management development, all of that area, but dignity at work as well. Probably so many inquiries are coming in at the moment in terms of dignity at work for people who are trying to manage conflict situations, trying to deal with HR situations, trying to make sure that we create a good working environment. So we see those in terms of the queries that are coming into us in terms of the courses. That kind of reflects what the requirements are out there in industry and what people are looking at to make sure that they have the best working environment possible. In terms of staff, we have some government updates, obviously, in terms of sick leave that came into being this year. Minimum wage, which we probably heard as late as yesterday evening, was being increased by 80 cents shortly. The right to disconnect, the right to remote working. So that's all in favour of the employee, obviously, and trying to make it a better working environment in general for employees. And obviously, it's a challenge in terms of organisations, in terms of the rollout on that and being able to manage that as well. So the value of payroll versus non-payroll initiatives, I suppose, pay, it can't always be a race to the top. There's only a limited amount, especially for smaller companies. We can't fight on that basis in terms of necessarily pay rates there. So what other things can be done in terms of non-payroll initiatives, in terms of, whether it's, healthcare, hybrid working, holidays, leave entitlements, all of those kind of things that we can look at that are not necessarily, an amount per hour basis, but something else that we can think of that might be a benefit to staff. In our own case, we have things like healthcare, we have things like debt and service, we have things like additional holidays for loyalty. All of those kind of things come into play for us as well, and I think really do help. Culture and remote working. So the difficulty for how people are actually struggling to manage culture, to build a culture during remote working. Particularly during COVID, I suppose we were doing a lot of DSE assessments, workplace assessments to make sure health and safety in the workplace. And some of the things that we saw and some of the things that employees were saying to us was that they felt very disconnected. They felt very isolated from their organization as well. That's, I suppose, a big issue for companies. How do we continue to make sure that we have that viable culture, that teamwork, collaboration, all of that, when we're actually either working fully remotely or working in a hybrid working environment? How do we make sure we're supporting our staff? How do we make sure we're collaborating and working with them and making sure they don't have those feelings of isolation or disconnection? If somebody who's feeling disconnected is working in the same place with the same, type of equipment, if we don't do these things, then it doesn't matter to that employee whether they're working with company A or company B. And for €1 more per hour or whatever the case will be, let's certainly move on. So it's important that we try and build that. We'll touch on that. So just a note on some of the things that people are saying in terms of their exit interviews, in terms of studies that are there at the moment, which is really changing. So toxic work culture is far and away now the biggest thing. So more than 50% on average across multiple different studies are showing that people will leave an organization and go to a different organization for a better working environment and not necessarily pay. So pay is on top of some surveys, but it's actually decreasing. Each survey that we see, it's decreasing a little bit in terms of just the pay rate on its own, but more for culture and more for better management, more for flexibility, more for remote working. That's why people are moving organizations and going to other organizations. So it's important for us to be mindful of that. It's not necessarily all based on pay rate. And I suppose management has become a much bigger issue in terms of why people are leaving roles. We've heard that before, I suppose. People leave roles, they don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And obviously, if we can invest in our managers, train our managers, and make sure our managers are fit for purpose and our leaders are fit for purpose, we're less likely to have people leave us. A Gallup study showed only about 1 in 10 people possess the talent to manage. That's interesting because sometimes we automatically assume because somebody's there and somebody's a certain amount of experience that they should be a manager. I suppose we need to be very mindful. Is that person suitable as a manager? Is that person suitable to be a leader? A team leader, for example, are they suitable for managing high performance teams? And again, if only 10% are, then we need to choose very carefully who are the people in our businesses who are going to actually manage people. You might have seen this one before from college or from other courses you do, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Why do I mention it? It's because I suppose we're very mindful that at the base of it, what people need, their safety and security and these type of things. But up at the top end of the spectrum, self-actualization is people need to have the opportunity to be the best person they can be, essentially. So they need to have all those opportunities to develop and to lead and to be the best person. So self-actualization is very important, and training and development is essential in relation to that, giving people responsibility, not micromanage them. Some of those things that we're going to see as well. In terms of motivation factors, I'll mention another, Hertzberg's. So the two-factor theory being that, it's not, pay isn't a huge motivating factor. In fact, it's more about job dissatisfaction and satisfaction. You'll find that if someone gets a pay raise, the benefit of that actually goes out quite quickly in terms of their overall motivation. So their intrinsic versus extrinsic in terms of what they actually want. So they want responsibility, they want accountability, they want autonomy, all of those different things. Whereas some of the things that are non-pay can actually be bigger motivating. So promotional opportunities, recognition, reward, all of those type of things that sometimes don't take a lot of cost, but do take some of our leaders and managers time in terms of how often do we actually say to somebody, you're doing a really good job for us. We couldn't manage without you today or this week, or whatever the case is. There's a theory that shows basically 1 minute's additional recognition gives us back about 60 minutes additional productivity. So we get back 60 times what we give in terms of acknowledgement, but how many of us actually take the time to do it? And I think we're all guilty a little bit of maybe not doing that as much as we should. So number of different things that staff need, and I can't go through everything, there's quite a bit in the presentation, but time and resources, training, supervision, motivation, appreciation, reward, the type of things I meant. Justice, feel that they're being treated equally with everybody else, coaching, mentoring. So all of those different things in terms of what staff needs. But their experience then is how they interface with the workplace and what has an impact on that. Communication is a big part of it. Company culture and the building of company culture, technology that people use, the location, whether it's hybrid situation. What we're finding even in terms of recruitment is, as people are coming back, one of the first questions they're asking us now is how many days are we going to be in the office? This role, how many days is it? Is it a hybrid situation? Is it a remote situation? And, they're basing their options in terms of that, in terms of what company they're going to go to. So it's very important for us. If we have the flexibility and if that's a decision that we can make, then I suppose we should be open to it. How many of us would have been open to it 3 years ago? Probably not a lot of us, but that has changed over the last number of years. In terms of employee experience, we can see there that managers, leaders account for about 70% of the variance in terms of how employees experience work. So a huge impact. So we really do need to develop our leaders, develop our managers, and develop our own leadership skills in relation to that. What does that type of leader look like? So it's somebody who's personally effective. It's somebody who can motivate people, who can communicate, someone who's an active listener, someone who will give feedback constructively. So, creating a culture of accountability, consistency. What does that mean? That they deal with people on the same basis. They don't have their favorites. There's equality right across the board. That we don't play the blame game. So basically, the culture of blame, people won't own up to issues that are there. So we want to try and make sure we lead by example. So the whole aspect of do what I do, not necessarily just what I say. Building relationships and decision making. That's what we want to try and instill in our leaders and in our managers as well. When we talk about retention, then it's not just about keeping staff for the sake of keeping staff, but it's in keeping them engaged, motivated, and invested. Studies will show that about 18 to 26% of people who are hired, of new hires, will leave within the first year. As I said earlier on, there's always going to be a certain amount of turnover and attrition, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. But obviously, if our turnover rates are rising, then our costs are rising. We don't get any return on things like training and development, for example. So the importance of retention for ourselves and our organization then are all around the experience, the culture, making sure the communication, the return on training and development. For example, if we spend a lot of money on training and development, then we need to make sure that that person is going to be there so that we get the return on that. It's a lower cost. So if we can increase our retention, decrease our turnover, we get lower cost, we get better productivity and efficiency. Okay, so that's really important for what we do. So some questions that you might ask yourself: why should people work for your organization? So why should they join you rather than join a competitor if a new role comes up? And not just necessarily pay rates, not necessarily remote working, but what are the emotional reasons that you can give somebody as a unique selling point that maybe your competitor can't? What can you do differently? And then why should your current staff stay? Why should they stay with you and not go to somebody else? There are a number of kind of things we need to ask ourselves at the moment. Some of the consequences then, if we are losing staff, and just looking at, first of all, often people ignore, they're very mindful of it, but they don't quite equate it properly, would be cost. It takes about 4 to 6 months for a new hire to become productive and efficient, generally speaking. So obviously that's a cost straight away. So if you're losing staff, that cost is continuous. Salary, induction and training. So the management time, the administration of the exit itself. So therefore all the time it actually takes from a HR perspective. The gap time of rehiring. So don't necessarily get somebody in immediately. We have to find them. We have to go through the interview process, an expensive process. So that cost and time in terms of that. Then the brain drain. So obviously we lose a lot of work that we've already put into somebody. We lose a lot of staff resources. So we're putting more pressure on the staff that we have remaining. The impact on staff morale. So people are saying, okay, why are other people leaving? Are they getting better? Is it a better role that they're going to? So our faraway hills greener. That really gets in among staff as well. And they start thinking, if other people are leaving and they're doing better, maybe I should leave also. So then there's a whole aspect of the external brand, or the internal and external brand of, what's happening there that a lot of people are leaving. Is it about conflict? Is it about management? And are we even hiring right in the first place? So all of those are consequences of high staff turnover. So why do they go then? Some of the things that we see, the reasons that people go, are the hiring gap. So we don't hire correctly in the first place, making sure we're fully honest in terms of our roles that we have in the interview process. So making sure we're diverse, that we're inclusive. Low engagement. So is there a lack of emotional connection between the employee and the company? So is there enough communication going on? Are employees engaged enough? In terms of compensation and benefits, absolutely, we have to be competitive, but it's not the be all and end all necessarily. So disengaged employees will leave for money, but obviously engaged employees who are, instilled with the company culture will be less likely to leave for that. Perceived underappreciated, undervalued. So are we actually recognizing people? Are we appreciating them? So there's a lot of things that are non-core paid remuneration in terms of what we do as healthcare, other aspects that we can actually put in place for our staff that make a difference. Other issues, burnout, stress, and obviously if people are leaving, if there's high turnover, then there's more stress and pressure being put on the remaining employees. So workload, unsociable hours. We have the right to disconnect now, but supports. How can we support our staff? Do we have an employment assistance program, for example, or how active are HR in terms of reaching out, and our leaders and team leaders in terms of reaching out to our own staff, finding out how they can be supported, finding out what issues they might have. Career progression. So if there's not training and development opportunities, if people can't be that best person they can be in terms of self-actualization on Maslow's hierarchy, mentoring, coaching, how can people be improved? How can we have progression? What are the internal progression opportunities that are there? Management interaction. So we mentioned about 70% of that will go in terms of management interaction. So maybe lack of communication, maybe micromanaging. So not trusting people, maybe different management styles and the ability to be able to manage different personalities. Have we got reasonable expectations of people, and are we applying the rules consistently for everybody? Are we leading by example, or are we just asking people to do things? So lack of trust, lack of support. There are a number of different reasons why people will leave. And just to note maybe that how we would recognize if people were feeling in that way, demotivated. So maybe, fatigue, lack of engagement. So they're not communicating back with us anymore. Frequent sick leave or last minute leave requests around compensation, complaints, HR issues. They're all little notes to ourselves that maybe not everything is right in our organization and that we need to get more involved. So question, do we know enough things about our team members? Are we actively involved? Do we understand, little bits about them from a personal point of view that would actually inform us? If we knew more, maybe we would know what motivates them a little bit better. And more difficult in a larger organization. But that whole aspect of culture, so trying to build that culture, more difficult while people are working remotely. But that culture, a company's beliefs and related behaviors, how we're actually all tied in. And the better the organization culture we have, the less likely people will leave just for money alone. So a number of items there that I won't necessarily go through all of them in terms of, benefits of that culture, but it's brand reputation. It's about keeping the talent we have. It's about less staff turnover. So some questions first. Do we make ourselves available to staff? Whether it's new starts, whether it's chats, conversations, whether it's to meet them for mentoring, coaching. So do they know how to contact us? Do they know that we are available to be contacted? So constant communication right through from the start. Sometimes we're all very good in terms of communication with our new employees, but as time goes on, we have less communication. So do we know what personal events and milestones they might have? Do we know if they're returning from illness? Do we know these things about them? Have we got a good handle on that? Gratitude and appreciation, as we said, 1 minute's appreciation gives you 60 minutes additional productivity. But how often do we actually take the time to do that? It makes a huge difference to people. A word of thanks, a word of appreciation. But often maybe we get too busy and we don't actually spend our time to do that, to say thanks to people and let them know that we actually we recognize that and we appreciate it. Dignity at work. One of the courses we're asked for, very frequently at the moment. Toxic work environments mean people will leave. Can we make sure that we're actually dealing with staff in that way, that we're not allowing things to develop that are going to cause a problem? As Aubrey Daniels said, by failing to address problem behaviors, we get more of them, which basically means if we allow unacceptable behavior to carry on in our organization, that's going to happen more and more often. And people, instead of actually making informal or formal complaints, will actually leave your organization. They might tell you at the exit interview, but that's the time you'll actually find out. So it's really important we don't let victimization, discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, bullying, for example, be ongoing in our organization, and we take proactive steps to deal with that as well. A little bit about engagement, just trying to make sure that we have staff as engaged as possible. That gives us our additional effort. If they feel that we actually care and there's that emotional connection between ourselves and our staff, that's where we get that discretionary effort. That's where we get the productivity. That's where we get efficiency. And also it's a two-way win. So engagement is hugely beneficial. So 80% of staff on average tend not to be engaged, but they'll do about twice as much if they are engaged. So it's really important in terms of that communication, appreciation, culture, all the things we just spoke about there. So lastly, last 2 slides, just a couple of things that we could look to do. So hire well, first of all, and manage our expectations and give honesty in relation to our hiring process. Have our leaders and manage lead by example, not just tell people to do, but actually show them how to do it. Give them constructive feedback along the way. So seek and welcome input, complaints, feedback. Some people see complaints as a negative, but complaints allow us to improve. Create a culture of safety, dignity and respect, making sure we have that positive work environment that people want to come into work in and there's not those kind of ongoing issues. Compensation and benefits, to get them right. But again, it can't necessarily be a race to the top, especially for small and medium companies, can't necessarily pay the same as what other companies might be able to pay. So we need to really be innovative and think about how we're going to manage that. Recognition and appreciation, taking the time really to do that. Empathy, so do we know our team? Can we give that support to our team, employment assistance programs and whatever else people might need? So giving that feedback and ongoing mentoring, making your employees successful. So giving them the internal opportunities, the leadership and development, training and development, and trying to challenge them instead of just having somebody doing the same job. Are we looking for opportunities for the right people to actually be promoted internally? Delegate and trust. So again, not to micromanage, look at someone over someone's shoulder all the time, but actually give them the autonomy, give them the trust, and delegate out as much work as they can realistically take on, that they're happy to take on, to challenge themselves. And then the problem solving. So when issues arise, try and solve them in a manner that's fair and not a blame game of pointing fingers at people. Accountability is great, but blame certainly won't deliver any value. I think if we kind of practice those, we will be able to retain more staff, we'll have less staff turnover, and we'll have a better working environment for everybody. So thanks very much for your time. Just on the presentation, a little bit more about Optima training and all we do, but I'll share out that presentation to Caoimhe, who will distribute it onwards as well. Thanks very much for listening to me, and for Caoimhe and the Chamber for having me on the session. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Adrian. That was absolutely fantastic. And it just reminds us all to take time there and just invest in the employees that we have, whether it's their future and their potential with you, but also if they just want to achieve the smaller things, enjoy the work a bit more, so just keep the toe in. So thank you for that reminder. I'm going to now welcome our new speakers, our second speakers. So we're delighted to welcome Rory Ryan, Operations Director, and Fergus Barry, the HR Director of Kirby Group Engineering. Kirby Group are actually the winners of the 2021 Best Employer Business Employee Value Proposition Award and the Limerick Chamber Regional Business Awards. Rory kindly attended there last year in a very unusual and quieter ceremony. So hopefully this year we'll be returning back to our live and full event. Many of you may be aware of Kirby Group as a staple Limerick business founded in Limerick in 1964. a leading mechanical and electrical engineering contractor operating across Ireland, UK and Europe with a workforce of over 1,300 highly skilled professionals. I'm sure throughout these years, with the generations of workforces, Rory and Fergus certainly will have some wonderful insights for us today. So Rory and Fergus, I'll just hand over to yourselves.
Thanks, Caoimhe, and good afternoon, everyone. So look, myself and Fergus will take you through a presentation. If you want to just go to the next slide there briefly, Caoimhe. Thanks. So just a small background, I won't spend much time on this, but Kirby's was established by two local brothers in Limerick, Tom and Michael Kirby, in Thomondgate in the inner city in 1964. And I suppose the company is still very much privately owned. The family have grown the business across 12 different countries. And I suppose it's a testament to the good people who have scaled this in the manner they have. And our head office is now in Raheen Business Park in Limerick. I suppose Fergus is going to take you through some of our core values and some of the investing and people focus. But we currently employ directly 1,300 people. And we have over 2,500 people directly employed and subcontractors across Ireland and Europe at present. Thanks. We have the next slide there, yeah.
I'm having a technical issue with this, so bear with me. There we go.
So again, look, I suppose the sectors for people, just so you have an understanding of where we're working and what we're doing. Predominantly, a lot of our work is focused in data centers, life sciences, pharmaceutical, industrial manufacturing, semiconductor, power and energy are the sectors where we spend most of our business. In terms of services, we provide high voltage, medium voltage, power transmission and distribution, electrical instrumentation, mechanical piping and HVAC, commissioning and system turnover, and off-site manufacturing. And I suppose just to give you an overview myself, as Caoimhe said, I'm an operations director with Kirby's. I started with the business when I was 17 as an apprentice electrician in Thomondgate. And I suppose, look, I've been very fortunate that I've been afforded the opportunities by Kirby management over many years to work my way up through electrician, through site manager, project manager, etc. And I'm currently operations director with the business. So look, it's a great story. We're very proud of Tom and Michael Kirby and what they've achieved over the many years. Fergus, do you want to keep going on the next slide there?
Yeah, Caoimhe, if you roll that on there. So good afternoon, everybody. Again, the key issue in looking at retention of employees, leadership is at the core of that, as Adrian pointed out earlier. And I thought it was a very interesting presentation and gives all the right tips. But I'm going to try and share with you is the approach we take at Kirby that's allowed us. And Rory will remember, as I will, back to 2015 when we were 400 employees. And say we're getting closer to touching 1,400 as we're currently ramping up again within the company. So we've had 7 years of sustainable growth, and with that type of growth, what makes you successful in order to grow from 400 to 1,400 employees and continue serving your customers well, what's required is to keep that core culture piece. And Adrian, right through Adrian's slideshow, there was this reference at times coming there to culture. And in many ways, it is all about culture. And the big fear any growing company has is that we actually lose culture as we're going forward. So leadership at Kirby, it's values driven. Our strategy is also values driven. And we've actually put that down as our differentiator, our values. And we'll have a look at those in a moment. We expect every leader to be a cultural leader, and that means we have a way of doing things in Kirby. It's not the same as our competitors, and it's enabling us to grow successfully, because once that is what our customers want, we find more and more customers coming to us, and more importantly, more repeat work from the same customers going forward. And again, we're facing into major growth as we look forward for the next 3 years based on that piece. We have a leadership brand within the organization, and it means having to set out clearly from your culture behaviors you expect from every leader. And if you put this back to Adrian's presentation, what we're trying to do is get our leaders to do many of the things in Adrian's presentation, but that's our way of doing things in the Kirby style. We want people to be authentic, and Kirby won't make apologies for being a high performance culture. Again, a great place to work for high performance, highly flexible people who want to make a difference and want to have a good total reward package. That's what we're actually looking at. So using leadership as the key, as Caoimhe has set us up on this webinar, is and leadership is the key. And leadership is always to blame if your retention is high, and leadership is also should get the credit when your retention level is where you want it. And again, that's what we aspire to doing, and so we work at all stages. Thanks, Caoimhe. Can you roll it? At the basis is an ethical view, and this was actually we're looking at strategy again in Kirby at the moment, just renewing our strategy. But 3 years ago we set out with a 3-year plan, and this was the underlying opening phrase of the strategy. That has to come into how our leaders behave, and we don't start any training program in Kirby without this slide going up, you know, and that's about the company's cultures that will be ethical, honest, and fair with our customers. And our core values are people, safety, quality, delivery, and value. So it's very tailored. It's very for Kirby. Same wouldn't, well, I presume the ethical, honest, and fair will suit you. But if you think of the traditional view of contractors, it might not always fit with that. But that's what we're selling. That's what we're offering. To make that happen, it means that every leader in Kirby has to behave like that. And that means we need to set that out. We need to hold people to account against that, and if anybody didn't live to it, we will move them on. So we're values driven, and that's demanded of everybody across the organization at every level, because without that across the leadership, and again I jump back to Adrian's slides when he's talking about the fairness, the justice, but people want to be part of something that's worthwhile, that makes a difference, and something that they're proud to be able to say. When you're in the back of a taxi and the taxi driver asks you where do you work, you want to be proud to say that. And again, this enables us, and it is something that Kirby people are proud of. Thanks, Caoimhe. So there's our 5 values. The first one is putting people first, which is interesting because we don't sell machines. We don't sell IT code. What we sell are a professional services team that will manage the delivery of your electrical or mechanical engineering project. And we also sell the direct professionals who will actually build that for you. So 2 different groups of people really within the company. But what we sell, we're a professional services company, and so that is and will always be all about people. And our major cost is people. I previously worked with ESP, where we had major assets, generation assets, power stations, money point, all that kind of piece. But in Kirby, we sell people. So putting people first is at the core of strategy and has been the core of our values. Safety, obviously, again, in our industry, it's just a must. And we have a beautiful piece of culture, a little cultural phrase for any of you that I would well advised, is that total discomfort at all times as regards safety. We have to always be worried about that and ensure we as management don't ever feel comfortable that everything's safe. And that level of uncertainty, that level of being alert is the opposite to the fisherman or fisher person who actually just begins to no longer respect the sea. So safety through everything we do, get everybody home safe every day. Quality, it's a basic, it's a given, but it's also a differentiator, and again, to do it right. Delivery, our clients want multi-million-pound projects delivered often in an 8-month period. We have to pull together a team, a professional services team to manage it, a professional services team who will actually directly do it and deliver that within 8 months. And that's something we're good at. That's in the culture of the company. That dates from 1964 in Thomond, but that's how you grow a company to an international scale from a corner of Limerick. And the next one is value, and we take the sort of Harvard view on value, which is a collaborative view of value. We want our people to look at how we can do things and create value for the client and share that with the client and share it with ourselves, which again differentiates us. And again, we demand that every one of our leaders is thinking and acting and behaving essentially like this. And again, that relates back to something Adrian said a little bit earlier. Thanks, Guido. Our culture then, if you want to have a leadership brand, you have to set out, and if you want people to live to a culture, and if you're growing from it's easy to 200 people. It gets harder to keep it, like we call people, we say they have blue blood when they're pure Kirby background and they've grown in the culture, they have the culture, but that will bring you to 200 people. As you begin to move to 400 people, you have to be clear. And if you want to induct on board people effectively, so Rory has clear blue blood. I'm a blow-in from 2015, but the new people who come in have to know what is it. We have to see that from the within the company and the behaviors, and that's how any of us join any culture. So we have 3 pillars to our culture. One is delivery excellence. The second one is being customer focused, and the third one is being a value creator. And we hold all our staff to this culture, and it's actually measured in our performance reviews, where each employee will self-rate themselves against these headings, and each manager will self-rate, and that becomes it will self-rate, but they'll also rate each employee, and then at the actual review we'll share that information, and they'll actually work through an agreed score on the culture piece, because culture is not optional. It's the way we do things, and our leaders behaving like this are passing on the genes that will make this effective into the future. Plus, a key thing in engagement is that my values fit with the value of the company, and the greater clarity we can put there gives us greater justice and enables some more people to show. So we've made this explicit. We manage to it, we succession plan on it, we performance review on it, and we train by sharing this and sharing it every chance we get. Thanks, Guido. On retention then, I believe if you really look into engagement, in a previous role at the Irish Management Institute, I would have been the engagement expert as such, but the research we were working on in that area identified that there's 4 different levels of engagement, or I prefer to actually, probably the simplest way to describe it, there's 4 umbilicals that are actually sticking or attaching your employee to Kirby in our case. And so, you know, why do employees leave? And again, Adrian would have highlighted the famous research. You know, they tend to leave the leader or leave the boss. But that's one of the 4 levels. And again, people, if you look, why do they leave? They leave if the work, and again, he mentioned stressful work and not proper breaks, all that kind of piece. But again, our badly organized work or work without the right tools, as you'll see in the Gallup program. But so people leave because the work is not what they want. The leader is not giving them the relationship that they want. The team is not giving them the relationship and the joy they should get from, and development they should get from working in a team. And the 4th one is that they do not actually match with the values of the organization. They don't believe that the organization is living to its values, or they believe what it's doing is not worthwhile. So that gets, so if we look at engagement at each of those 4 levels, we can then use that to actually identify what we need to do to improve our employee experience at each of those. So we actually have a live engagement survey out on this at the moment. We've achieved last year Investors in People Platinum, and we got the highest engagement grouping internationally in our industry sector, which we're very, very proud of on that. Eva, can you move that forward?
That's the next slide there. Fergus, engagement.
Yeah, that's the, if you can move on to the next one, yep. So engagement with the work then is working on leading edge projects is what engages our people and engages people in our industry. They want to be working on top projects, which them a great sense of purpose, great sense of achievement, but also if you're working on the top projects for our clients in the Limerick, in the Midwest area, you're working for some of the best companies in the world on leading edge infrastructure for the medtech or pharma world, for the data center world, and for the renewable energy world. And again, that gives a great sense of purpose. People want a purpose. They want to feel part of something important, and they want to feel part of making the world a better place. So improving connectivity, improving health, improving sustainability. These are the things. So again, people working on leading edge projects that are well structured with the right tools is what people want there, and that's what we're looking. But we're surveying this to get feedback from each team and each area and each individual as we're going forward. Freedom to perform as a professional, and that's, I did an engagement survey when I joined Kirby way back in 2015, and it's a great trick of a new HR director. And again, if you get a bad one, you can say how great you are to change it. My horror in Kirby as I arrived, and the engagement survey was top notch. And I went back to the board and said, hey guys, I did this to see where the gaps were and how I could make it better. You're top notch. So if I can just hold it there, I'll be doing well. But that it is interesting. And I'm sort of saying, how was a company that wasn't putting a great effort into the textbook views of engagement could outscore many companies who've been working on engagement for many years? And I think it's because people in Kirby are treated as professionals, are given the freedom to do the job, and are expected to perform. And that was my view at the time. World-class systems and tools. And again, the chance to work on those makes me a better professional. So when I finish a project, I've worked on world-class systems and tools. Therefore, I'm actually a more valuable professional myself, and I can actually pass that on. The opportunity to input and innovate, again, I would say we have a very egalitarian grouping in Kirby, and it's always open to input and people's ideas, and people at all levels will listen, and we make great efforts in that. And we're asking people through our value leg of our culture to continuously innovate. Learning and variety, we build new projects. We're always working, and we are working with top companies on the planet. And again, you learn guilt by association, but in this case, it's learning by association with some of the top learning companies in the world. And that makes us better, and that's what has been making us better through the years. And I say, Rory has worked with some of the top companies on the planet, and again, working closely with their top managers, it makes you better. Thanks, Kevin. The leader then, we expect our leaders to model high performance. That's what their performance review is against. We expect them to listen. We expect them to get stuck in. And again, that's very Kirby. We like our managers to be hands-on. In our culture, we have a thing of attention to detail. And that goes right through this company. And again, at every level, you're expected to know the granularity as well. And that's our culture. It's not every company's culture. It works for us. And that means anybody working here needs to have that attention to detail. They need to be interested in people, and they need to care for and push for people's development. Now, we have one little advantage in that. I'm talking of since 2015, a company that's grown from a turnover of 150 million to essentially, it will be very close to 500 million next year. So we've had the growth, we've had international growth. So if you want to develop, there's great opportunities here. And again, I think Rory could explain that very, very clearly to us and show us the real proof of that. Again, we're fair and consistent. And again, that's the people thing. And people, delivery, attention to detail becomes clear. With the team then, we like to have a bit of fun. We care about the people around and we try and listen to what's going on, and people have real lives, and we all have real lives and real issues, challenges, problems. And again, we expect that there's support there, and not just employee assistance schemes and that. And we have all those, but more so colleagues who look out for you and friends who look out for you. And again, we will go the extra mile on that. Again, I did an employee with an issue internationally, and we had them delivered to their house carefully with a colleague. And again, you know, when a challenge arises, the colleagues step up and the company steps up. Again, Why? Because we care, because people is our business, really. We handle conflict well, and again, do we always get it right? No, I think Adrian would have highlighted that earlier. But we aspire to handle it well and aspire to, look, let's get it out on the table and let's deal with it. We're all learning all the time. We are definitely not all perfect, but we are trying to learn. And in the teams, we want people learning, but we want to have good relationships with other teams. That includes, in our case, our client teams, the other contractors who are on site, our subcontractors, and again, Rory sort of highlighted that, so that becomes clear as we're going. Thanks, Guiva. The next level of engagement is with the organisation, and again, all our research is saying people want to be part of an organisation that's sustainable, and again, that means they want to know Kirby. Kirby's been here since 1964. It's sustainable. We need to know that what it's doing in the world is sustainable. And again, we're proud of what we're doing in the connected world, in the medtech pharma area, in industrial manufacturing, which is most of our work there is in the semiconductor chip area, and in the power renewables, which is our pure sustainable work for the planet. But again, as you go through each of those, what we do makes a difference. Our little piece of it, enabling these top world companies to build their infrastructures, to make the world a better place to live in, a healthier place to live in, better use of power and technology. And again, we link that to everything we're doing. So again, we care about and develop our people. And again, we spend a lot on that. We put a huge amount into educational support for people and into training for people. And we have our own training academy. And I suppose we're proud to announce here today is that we've got accreditation now from City and Guilds as a centre for accreditation, and we'll be starting our first programs in that in September. So that's a big step forward for us, and we're working on that. And again, continuing professional development, partner with Engineers Ireland in that as well. And so again, what we're looking at is, if people are our business, we have to develop those people, and the magic thing about people is they're a resource to develop. We care about our community. The Friday before last, Rory set us off from his headquarters in Limerick as we went on a cycle to Galway and then on to Dublin. That wasn't arranged by Kirby management, even though Rory and myself were on the committee. It was an idea from Kirby staff that Kirby fully supported. At the end of that, we raised essentially over 430,000 for Self-Help Africa, for sustainable, for growing trees, powering villages sustainably, and for National Breast Cancer Research Institute. So again, we're looking at there as a renewable power essentially, and medtech charities. But that's some achievement, and that's from a small committee of 15 people in the company, and something we're very proud of. The reason I'm just using that one, and our employees are involved in a lot of things like this, but we fully support, and we're very proud of our people that they can organise something with the logistics and with the outcome for the world that such an event would have. In attracting good people, then again, we're looking at the leadership piece. We're trying to attract them by saying, look, what we do is worthwhile. What we're doing is sustainable. You will get development if you join us. And we have what we call structured career growth and paths available. Now, you could say that's easy for me because the company's growing so much. There are promotional paths for people. If your company is growing very slowly or not growing, it's very hard to really both pay for or actually give people the real opportunities to grow and stretch. As Rory looks down his team, he'll be looking at people and he'll be looking to see, is she ready now to step up to the next piece? Because guess what? We do have openings, and whereas if you don't have the growth, you can't give people that opportunity to progress as quickly. So we expect our leaders to be leaders and ambassadors for Kirby and selling that piece. So leadership is important, not just in retaining people, but in attracting as well. Thanks, Guya. Our employee value proposition, sorry to use a sort of a phrase from a textbook, but we really live to this, because it is a tough world for recruiting out there at the moment, and we have to be clear, what are we selling when we're hiring? What we're selling is, look, a real and sustainable purpose as a company. We want to make our company, our communities better, and again, global connectivity, medtech, renewable power, improving that infrastructure. We want to offer real sustainable careers, and we have an absolute brochure. We bring people to the straight career stepping stones. There's educational support, and that's all mapped, brochured, and actually presented to people, and they actually work their way through that. And then the new sustainable ways of working then is looking at the total reward package, new ways of working. And that's really been a challenge, but we had to move people all through Europe through the pandemic, and we had to send our people home to work from home, and we got that mix. And again, we got used to working with that mix, and that's part of the future, is that being free, ensuring that you've got the right mix that matches what you're trying to do and enables people to have a life and have a high performance job. And again, what we offer, which I think was there from the start, and Rory will bear me out for this, is real empowerment. We use the 9-box talent management model then in development, and that's manager led. And we do that both at direct site level and at the professional teams levels on site as well. And again, that's so we're identifying, who are our future leaders, who are high impact performers, and who are our growth employees. And we take great efforts on succession planning. Thanks, Caoimhe. There are other slides in the pack which Caoimhe will share with you, but I'll finish on this one here, is that as a company that's value driven, that really believes that its success comes from the culture that we have, that has developed and evolved from Thomond Gate forward, and that is working with some of the top companies in the world internationally. We believe the big differentiator is how our leaders behave and how our employees behave. We believe feedback, behavioral-based feedback, is key to that. Otherwise, as I'm talking about things like values, culture, employee experience, the one common piece we have in each of these is the fact that all you can really measure around these things is behavior. How do you measure culture? The behaviors of the leaders, the behaviors of the people. How do you measure values? The behaviors of the people, the behaviors of the leaders. And again, if we say that's our differentiator, it's also, we believe, our key input. Input, outputs, outcome. And if we want to change an outcome on a project, we believe that we change the inputs, the behavioral piece. And we believe in a very candid approach to that, which is that not just love, positive feedback, nor do we want just negative feedback. We want constructive feedback and positive feedback. So again, what we're looking at is desired behaviors, we want to reinforce it, and undesired behaviors, we want to extinguish them. So that's how we roll things through. So the leader is essentially the model of our company, and they, through how they actually behave, and by they demonstrating the Kirby values, the Kirby culture, and by us measuring the engagement pieces, giving feedback to the leaders, the employees, we see that as being critical to the retention piece. It also enables us, by the way, to hire against culture, which means we're hiring people who will fit with our culture. And thirdly, it allows us all to grow as leaders or as performers on the basis that we're all getting feedback, and right to the top of the organization, from MD, Rory, myself, we all have executive coaches. We all do 360 reviews against the culture piece, and we get our coaching against that. So thanks, Caoimhe. Rory, do you want to jump in on that? That's the slideshow
Yeah,
covered.
that's great, Fergus, and look, thanks everyone for the time. I suppose, look, it's really important just to finish up there when we talk about leaders. I think honesty, integrity, trust, loyalty, these are words that are really important for the people who work for Kirby's and who the people we try and employ. It's very important, and it's something Adrian touched off as well, when we talk about leaders and retaining staff. Knowing the person, knowing their family, knowing what's going on in their life, knowing their strengths and weaknesses, and managing expectations. Not everyone is a black belt in what they do, so it's about managing expectations, getting them involved in decision making, bringing them out of their comfort zone to some degree, and showing them the purpose. You know, don't tell me, show me. Bring them along the journey, have a clear vision of what success looks like. And ensure they understand that these guys that they are valued and they're part of the team. Would be kind of just something to jump on what Fergus and Adrian have been saying also. Yeah.
That's perfect, guys. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. We definitely, I think I was writing there away. So we have a lot to take away from that. I suppose just to touch on what you've just said there, Rory, you've obviously been in the company since you were 17 and you really hit that trajectory path. You know, what was it that you felt nurtured you along the way? Was it investing in your potential, the upskilling that Fergus mentioned, or was it the culture as well?
Yeah, look, so it's a good question, Quiva, and I suppose, to be honest with you, there's a number of factors. There's not one answer here. I mean, I was very lucky, as I said, the family culture is probably what was very strong with Kirby's when I joined. You know, like, we were in a very small house in Thomingate, literally, when we started, and it's been a great story. But I remember, and Fergus touched off of reviews and feedback. I did a review a number of years ago. I was a site manager, and our current managing director asked me, you know, like, as part of the review was like, you know, where do you want to be in 10 years time? What's the future hold for you? And I suppose tongue in cheek said, I wanted your job, you know, I want to be sitting in that chair. And instead of having a laugh and a joke about it, he turned around and he said to me, well, how do we get you there? You know, and I think that's what's I suppose that I've been used to, and I suppose that's what, when I talk about my team as well, I mean, you're constantly looking for your replacements to build and to progress and to scale the way we have done over the years. So that feedback, that culture, that mentoring that leaders need to give their team, and encouragement. I can't stress that enough as well. You know, people make mistakes, you know, but you know what? Making mistakes is part of what success is. You know, learning to fail. And I think we've been very good at that. And I know there's a lot of businesses that are quite good at that, but certainly helping, encouraging and coaching or myself over the years. As I said, I've come up through different levels. I was put back to college. I spent some time in UL a number of years ago as well. And it's just having that belief in the people around you.
Yeah, and seeing what their potential could be, especially like Fergus mentioned there, the way you can categorize or tier companies, those who have potential. And Adrian, I think you had it as well. If you have someone who's naturally inclined, you can just nurture them along the way as well. But for anyone who just has ambition, invest in it. I think you touched on conducting the survey there, Fergus, and you said that Kirby Group was top tier when you got it. I suppose there is a lot around now. SMEs are trying to invest in this engagement piece heavily, especially in terms of what they could achieve or what they can put in place, especially at a low cost. So I suppose, what other tips or techniques could you do to help assess the engagement of your staff and nurture and foster that as well?
Yeah, I would say use a survey, even one of your own, and now, again, or get a good provider to do one for you if you want greater anonymity in it. And again, you can even talk to a university about that, and there's some fantastic colleges around the Limerick area with people who would be more than willing to help in that. The other one is what Rory said there, is talk to the people and listen. And again, I'd always define engagement as the willingness to work hard and go the extra mile for the company. And as you start looking around that, and by the way, there's symptoms of poor engagement. One is absenteeism, the other is poor quality, and the other is turnover. It's interesting. So
in terms of the quiet departure and all of this throwing around, so I think we're all at a loss as to what is actually happening in terms of HR. There's a lot to navigate.
Yeah, I think we need to be very careful of fashions at the moment.
Yeah.
We need to be careful. So many things are changing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, the engagement of your people. Have a look at people definitely before they go. What we've added, by the way, to our engagement survey at the moment, and is a little bit of a few questions. Is, did you think of leaving the company in the last 12 months? Do you expect to be here? And we never had I call those ideation questions. We never used them before, but I'm actually using some of those now.
Help you gauge where they're at. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and again, they're anonymized, but again, you'll know if an area has, and then you're looking to see that leader. The number of people thinking of leading. We better go in and do some work here. So it's or there's something wrong there, or they're under too much stress, so there's something like that. So again, watch for the symptoms. Watch for people withdrawing. Adrian mentioned that earlier as well. But watch for people withdrawing from management a bit, and then the third piece is I do believe you do need to survey it. And again, Andrew wants any. I have some simple tools if somebody wants them, and we can share them with you.
Thank you very much, Fergus. And we just have a question in there from Emily. And she's saying, can I ask as an SME, how can I demonstrate a healthy or progressive culture or a hands-on leadership style to my new staff or attracting staff? Adrian, I might ask you to throw some thoughts on that, and then after.
Yeah, look, it's a challenge, I suppose. I mean, advocacy is really beneficial. I think if you have happy staff, they will unfortunately not tell as many people as unhappy staff will, but they certainly will be a voice for future prospective people that you will bring in. I think something that Fergus mentioned there is very valuable. The community aspects to what we do, which are maybe outside of management, which really do really reflect well on the brand. And like to a smaller extent, we would have been involved in Milford Run, the full team of Optima. I think it's lovely to see companies out and about doing things together. That's not necessarily, as I think you mentioned there, Fergus, not driven by management. It's not a mandatory activity. It's something that for the common good and for social responsibilities that staff take it upon themselves. I think if that happens, then you generally find that staff are happy to represent the company, but they're not being told what to do, but they're actually that culture is enabling that to happen.
Definitely. Like, I think if you move it outside of the office, you get them all to bond, but it gives you a chance to personalize it, which I think is an ethos in Kirby Group there, where you personalize, you make the time, and you invest. So definitely all of those team building cultures or just activities outside of the workplace can help everyone get along. I think
so, because when you do meet up, then it's not on that same normal interaction that you have, in the workplace environment. You're outside of that, and it's more of a social aspect, where different personalities come across, and people can be a little bit more themselves, I suppose, outside of work as well, and that maybe get a handle on the different. We mentioned earlier on, what do we know about our staff? You hear things, I suppose, when you're in a different environment that you wouldn't necessarily maybe hear. That can sometimes then lead to you having a different understanding of somebody's circumstances. If somebody's late a number of times, okay, we can have the repercussions or the consequences, but what's at the heart of that? What's at the foundation? Do we know our staff? Maybe there's a particular personal issue that they're having, but how do we find that out? And we won't find out unless we actually ask those questions.
Absolutely, and even being flexible and adapting to, everyone has a school run that they have to do in the morning, so if it's a case where you need to start late or anything like that, it gives time to just make time for people's lives, but it's also showing that you're flexible on it as well, and I think that means a lot to culture.
Sorry, Caoimhe, I have to hop off at the moment. I just want to apologise. I have to jump at the moment. If anybody's interested in anything on the tools, on the engagement, give me an email. You can get the email from yourself, Caoimhe. Is that okay? Rory will take any other questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Fergus. I suppose my last question there is from Judy. She says, recruiting is challenging at present and see cases where when you offer a job, they take up and change their mind. Any tips on how we can be better at this stage, and also any insights as to why this can happen? So Adrian,
yeah, well, I'm sure Rory might have a different perspective. I suppose from our end, we're looking at it two ways. I suppose we're recruiting, but we also assist in the recruitment process. So we've vacancies ourselves, and we find them challenging to fill in terms of expectations of people coming in, what they're looking for, and there's a huge disparity in terms of what people will look for and their expectations on that. But there's, I suppose, counter offers are coming in. People are testing the water a little bit at times as well, I think, and they're seeing what's outside there. And I wouldn't quite call it a bluff at times, but certainly we're seeing a lot of counter offers being made even in the recruitment process, where somebody's happy to take up a new position, but just before they leave, their current company recognizes the cost that will be included in terms of what I called earlier on, the brain drain, and also the cost of rehiring, the cost of reskilling somebody. So they come in with another offer to the person who's just walking out the door. I think in the short term that that works reasonably well for the candidate, and they might go back in and take a little bit more money. But chances are, if they actually ask themselves the question, they probably haven't left solely down to money. There's other factors there involved, and unless those factors are actually managed, they're likely to be back there in 6 months' time again, looking at their external opportunities again. But it happens a lot in the recruitment process. Until such time as somebody has their contract signed and they're in a new role, we don't consider that recruitment to have been completed. Verbal confirmations, all the rest of it, contract signed, interviews done, that's when the recruitment process is concluded from our end, and even when somebody's in there for 3 months or 4 months. Rory, I'm sure you'd have a different maybe angle on that one.
Yeah, no, look, and I think, Adrian, you hit the nail on the head there. I think sometimes people might be just testing the water. I think sometimes people, like I said, do get counter-offered, and they may have no intention of leaving, but they want that security of knowing that there's a job there before they approach their employer as well, But I would be inclined to maybe ask the person, if they have accepted the offer, they've gone back, been counter-offered, it'd be worth getting the feedback yourself, and ask them, why did you change your mind and stay with the current employer? Because look, again, there could be other factors involved here as well. There's logistical reasons, there's many, and there's a fear factor as well, perhaps, of going out of your comfort zone and joining a new company. If someone was, as I said, I'm with Kirby's 26 years. I don't know what I'd do tomorrow morning if I went somewhere else, because this is all I've known. I'm very comfortable in that. But there is that fear as well,
One other thing that I do see as well is that people are testing their market value. What we see is, so somebody who might be with an organization for a period of time, has been maybe progressing up along the remuneration. But then when we're actually trying to hire new people now, they're coming in with, very different expectations of salary, etc. The temptation, obviously, when we're struggling for staff is that we would go outside of our normal budgets and we would pay those. But the people who are existing within our company, they're very much aware of that as well. And then they see, okay, well, for equality, I want to be on that same money as well. And that causes an issue. So it's that whole challenge of making sure, like the new offers for our telecommunications products, have only been available to new, people or new clients. It's the same in terms of the recruitment. If we're going to pay new people more, then there's automatically an injustice there in terms of the people who have been working for us all along and who are doing that same role. So I think that's causing a little bit of difficulty as well.
Absolutely. I think it kind of hits the nail on the head with both of you have mentioned about taking time to invest and communicate with staff. So if you do see them having some potential and you're making time to invest in it, you have to definitely be able to communicate that to them beforehand as well. So it does kind of lend to that as well. Open communications and engagement as the core piece. I think that's all of our questions for today, and I'm just conscious of time. So I'm going to say thank you so much to Rory Ryan, our Operations Director from Kirby Group Engineering, to Adrian Carmody, Managing Director of Optima Training and Consultancy, and Fergus Barry there, who had to drop off, but the HR Director of Kirby Group Engineering. We'll be sharing all the content from today's webinar as well, and we'll be hopefully sharing the recordings as well over the coming days. But I'll share the details for the guys if you have any further questions as well. But lastly, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.